Good afternoon, everybody. I've gathered you all here today to discuss my books and films that I have read and watched, respectively, this month, last month, May, April. I'm all over the place. It's afternoon. I usually film in the morning. My brain's scattered. Let's address the elephant in the room, the camera change. I dropped my Canon, my beautiful, beautiful Canon that I had done the color science on so perfectly to achieve that beautiful warm glow, and now I dropped it and it's not working, so they've switched to a Sony camcorder, which I have lying around, which I used to use for vlogging. Love you Sony camcorder, but just not the best for sit down shitty chatty videos, because obviously for a camcorder the quality isn't amazing. The second elephant in the room is a bookcase. Remember when I said I'd never ever buy a bookcase? Well, it got to the point where I got too many books, and 90% of my studio flat in London, it was just stacks of books. And you see, I could put a sofa where those books were, and if I put them into one neat place, maybe then I could get the sofa, and maybe then I could put my art easel in a place that's not the corner of the flat and make me want to make art more. So I did that. Everybody introduce yourself. It's much bigger than this. It goes all the way up and all the way down, but this video is not about that. I'll make a separate video about that, maybe. Back on track. I watched so many films and read 10 books in April, and it's time to catch you up on them and give you my reviews and my thoughts. As per usual, they're not giant. These are very readable sizes for books, which is okay, I think, because also I've been seeking a little more escapism. Also, this new month, May, I'm not going to be able to be reading as much because my agent just sent back a whole document of things I've got to do for my novel. So reading and films next month will be inherently less, but we have such a big month this month. 10 books and how many films? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Holy shit! 15 films and 10 books in May. This video might be long before I jump straight into incessantly rambling about everything I have consumed this past month. Let's have a quick word from today's wonderful sponsor, Squarespace.
I've worked with Squarespace many times before, and I adore Squarespace because it is a platform that makes the whole process of creating and maintaining websites so seamless and, dare I say, enjoyable. I say this from personal experience because I wanted to give back to my community who support my creative endeavors, so I built an online literary and arts journal / lovely little arts community via Squarespace. You can submit your poetry, fiction, art, and essays to me based on the monthly prompts, and I just might publish your work. Squarespace is so great for turning passion projects into professional projects and morphing dreams and concepts into tangible realities. This is done simply by the Fluid Engine design system and Squarespace Blueprint, which is a guided design system to assist you in crafting a completely personalized website. There's elements I'm excited to eventually incorporate, like an online store with flexible payments. It's all so fun and easy to design, and you can so easily set up your own site too. Head to squarespace.com/Dakota Warren to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain using code Dakota Warren.
Okay, so we're gonna flip it upside down and start in chronological order. Books first, as per the usual drill. You know the drill by this point. If you've been watching my monthly wrap-ups thus far this year, you know the drill. First book that I read this month was the Book of Longing from Leonard Cohen. Leonard Cohen was a poet and a singer and songwriter, and some of the most beautiful stuff comes from his mind. So I wanted to pick up some poetry because I've been listening to some of his music. It was quite sweet. I think it was quite sweet. Ultimately, the core of this was quite sweet. I don't think its intention was to be sweet, but it was quite sweet because it felt very pure. It felt sweet and from a good place, even though he was talking about not necessarily pure, sweet things. The book just moved. Scary. There was a thunderstorm last night, and I have a dress hanging. I have a wedding dress hanging on the corner of my bedroom. Don't ask why. It's vintage. You see a true vintage 60s wedding dress, you buy it, even if you're in your 20s and have no intention of getting married, as of this moment. Anyway, I thought it was a vampire, because I woke up to a storm and lightning flashed, and I see this big white figure, this big wedding dress in the corner. My first reaction, my first response, vampire. quickly accepted my fate and went back to sleep. Anyway, this book was good. I liked it. I mean, there were some gems. You can always see the pages that are folded based on how many poems I really enjoyed. It was quite hit or miss for me, but I've heard other collections are much nicer. But the ones that I did enjoy, I very much enjoyed. If you aren't familiar with Leonard Cohen, I recommend checking out his music as well as his poetry. I post snippets of all the quotes of books that I read, sometimes my Instagram stories or on the main posts or on my TikTok, so follow those to get snippets of what I like to underline, I suppose. So there's this. Next up I read, loved this one. I think this might be my favorite read of this month and also my favorite, or one of my favorite reads of this year thus far, and that is Widow. I say the last name wrong, okay? You guys slammed me in my last video because I said the last name wrong. I googled it. I fully googled it before I recorded that video and pressed play and listened to it and tried my best to copy what was said, but I suppose I went on the complete wrong. You know all the YouTube videos that says how to pronounce this? I went on the complete wrong YouTube video in that case, because the YouTube video told me to say Basquiat. It's not Basquiat. It's by Jennifer Clement, about the artist's ex-lover, past lover. Her name is Suzanne. This is Jean-Michel and Suzanne. And if you don't know who Jean-Michel is, he was an artist, primarily popular in the 80s in the New York scene. Very new, unique, interesting kind of graffiti art that was popularized and turned into this whole genius thing. If you look into him, it's such a specific niche style and so wonderful, and he was such an interesting person as well. I watched his biopic where David Bowie plays Andie Warhol. That's a whole story in itself. I think I've spoken about that in one of these wrap-up videos as well, but just that was an experience. But this was such an intimate, beautiful glimpse on their relationship. It's about the love that they shared and the art that they made together, both physical, literal sense and love as a form of art. And I cried at the end of it. It's so beautiful. It's so tumultuous. There's a lot of drug addiction, a lot of abuse, awful, awful stuff. But at its core, it is about love. And it's true. And you know, when something's true, I'm gonna cry about it because true things are sad. And that's the harsh reality of it. I liked this book a lot. This is probably the one that I recommend the most out of all of them. The next book that I read is Virginia Woolf and Vita Sackville West's Love Letters. I know that in a past video I said, oh, I don't agree with the ethics of publishing posthumous letters and diaries, but I wanted to read this. I don't agree with the ethics of it, but I wanted to read it. The blurb just says, I am reduced to a thing that wants Virginia. I composed a beautiful letter to you in the sleepless nightmare hours of the night, and it is all gone. I just miss you. Ah! If you don't know who Virginia Woolf and Vita Sackville West are, where have you been? Two prolific writers of their time, two prolific woman writers who had an affair, both married to men who had a very long sapphic affair together. Those spans over a very long time, many, many, many years in this, and reading these letters, you see them fall slowly, 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 get to know each other, and then all at once, they're madly in love. It's this whole thing. It ends quite sadly as well, of course, knowing Virginia Woolf's demise at her own hands. But this is a beautiful collection that made me believe in all kinds of love, even if sometimes it's sad. The next book that I read was Anais Nin's In Favour of the Sensitive Man and Other Essays. The title is funny, but it's not about sensitive men. I wish it was. This is just a collection of essays. If you don't know who Anais Nin is, one of my favourite writers. She was a diarist and a writer, very prolific of her time as well. I believe she's French-American. She was born in France, raised in France, and went to America. And her mind is unlike any other mind. If you read even just interviews with her or extracts of writing from her, I'm sure you've seen something somewhere. She's absolutely brilliant. Her diaries are what she's most renowned for. I spoke about that in my last video as well, on how to journal like a writer. And if you haven't watched that already, you should go and watch it. This was good. This was very good. Very digestible. Got to just read an essay each time I got in a bus. These are all just very, mostly feminist-centric, or art-centric takes. What one did I like the most? I did, of course, like In Favour of the Sensitive Man. The next book that I read was Women Photographers. Women Photographers, Pioneers from 1851 to 1936 from Thames and Hudson Photo File. So the order of books thus far, all of those books I had picked up quite recently. I know I've got a whole stack of books that I haven't read. Don't even talk to me about that. I saw those at Foyles and I bought them and I read them like that because I say this every video, I'm an intuitive reader. If I feel like reading something in the moment, I will. There's nothing worse than thinking, oh gosh, I've been meaning to read what's something that's notoriously a drag? War and Peace. I've been meaning to read War and Peace and bringing that with you and just kind of despising each time you open it up. Couldn't be me. Couldn't be me. I've never read War and Peace. Probably never will. No, I might. We'll see. Why was I saying this? Why am I saying this? Oh, intuitive reading. And so then I went to an exhibition, a really beautiful exhibition called Dreaming in Portraits, or Portraits I've Dreamt In, or something or other, at the National Portrait Gallery in London. And they had this in the souvenir shop, and some of the best books I've ever found have been in souvenir shops of art galleries and museums, because the curation is about what they have on show and it's always interesting. So this is beautiful. The exhibition itself is gorgeous. I really recommend that if you're in or around London. This is just a collection of female photographer pioneers from that particular time period, and it's such a special book because photography is something that I'm newly interested in. I've always been aware of its existence, of course, but after seeing that exhibition, it really stirred something within me that you can tell stories through one photo. This is old news, everyone knows this, but to me this is new news. And so this is a beautiful book to get inspired and see these beautiful women and their beautiful minds. The next book that I read, guess what I got? Guess what I got? Drum roll! I got Rachel Cusk's new book, A Proof. It doesn't come out until June. Oh, it's almost June. You don't have to wait that long. This is her new book, and I got sent the proof of it because I was on my knees for it. So hard to get these. Had to hunt these down. Me and my bookish friends, we were calling in all the shots to get one of these. Not many around, but loved this. I mean, it's no secret that I'm a Rachel Cusk super fan. I think her writing is absolutely brilliant. I fell in love with Second Place the first time I read it. I think about 3 years ago, 4 years ago, even now. And it was so magnificent, and the way she writes and makes you empathize with the narrator, it's unlike anything else. And so I was so excited to get my hands on this. Did not disappoint whatsoever. It's about, of course, a few lives that entwine and interfold, and it's about art, the modern art scene, and gender roles, and how that shapes and forms a person and their integrity and their ambition, and just a whole bunch of entanglement of this same kind of art, family, morality, gender, how we compose ourselves, identity, the Rachel Cusk-esque themes that never miss. The next book that I read was The Guest by Emma Cline. I was sent this as well, but this was, oh, I keep on getting scared by my plant. I'm not used to this area. I set this up yesterday. This was sent to me, but it was also perfect because my agent told me to read this based on my taste. So this is a personalized recommendation, and you best believe I take those seriously. So I sat down in bed one morning and read the entire thing from cover to cover. It's not that big. I know how much I say I read things from cover to cover, but I just want to clarify, you don't have to do that. Don't feel bad about yourself if you take longer to read. Because the reason I read so fast is because it's my job. I hope that makes sense. This was good. I liked it. I like Emma Cline, loved the girls, absolutely adored the girls. That was a life-changing experience for me. Daddy for me was okay. I've just never really been too much into short stories. It has to be a really, really, really unique special collection for me to fall in love with a short stories collection. But this was different. This was very different. This was very much her voice, of course. It's about a young woman who is teetering on the edge. She's behind on rent. She comes from this interesting, it's implied criminal past, or the shady past, and she's obviously on the run, and she's not wanted anywhere and kicked out of everywhere. She's got this strange morality, and she's just kind of wandering around. There's a lot of drugs and a lot of sex and all those kinds of things, but at the end of it, I got to the last page and tried to turn the page and there was nothing. What do you mean that's the end of it? If you've read this book, you know what I mean. What do you mean? It felt like it ended on like a middle chapter. I wish I knew what happened. I feel like someone needs to finish this. I hope there's a part 2. But it's good. It's good until then. It's good until the end. I'm sure the ending is good as well. I just want more. I want to know what happens. What happens? I got so invested and then it stopped. I do like a cliffhanger, in theory. Perhaps not in practice. The next book that I read, this was a reread. This is Thomas De Quincey's Confessions of an English Opium Eater. I read this for the first time when I was a bit younger. I think before university. This is one of the books that made me fall in love with more classic, kind of fancy lit. I say fancy lit because if you've read De Quincy, if you know anything about De Quincy, his prose is almost unbearable in how pretentious it is. He has sentences that are a whole page long, sometimes 2 pages long. There's just comma, comma, comma clause, comma clause, comma clause, and it just keeps on going. And it gets to the point where you have to come up for a breath when you're reading because it's just so wordy. This whole book could probably be summarized in 2 or 3 pages because he just keeps on going. He just yaps and yaps and yaps and yaps and yaps. But see, I like that. I am a prosy girl and I like a bit of yappy prose. It was a reread because, well, I just saw it on my shelf and knew that I liked it at one point in my life, so I thought, I'll read that again. It's about exactly what it says, Confessions of an English Opium Eater. It's about Thomas De Quincey in the 1800s, I believe. Just running about and doing a bunch of heroin. But yeah, that's this book. The next book that I read, this one's kind of embarrassing, but I must tell you, this is Herbs and Health by Nicola Peterson. Poster girl for it. I read this because, well, I thrifted it and the lady gave it to me for like 50p or something, so, you know, and I was on the bus home from the thrift store with the 50p book and thought to myself, perfect read. And also half of it is pictures and drawings, so it's not that big of a book, so I really did just smash it out. And now I've got this weird kind of glossary encyclopedia in my head of herbs and tinctures for certain things, because I have always been into herbs and that kind of stuff. My mom was always quite into it, and so there's this interest ingrained, and so it's nice to spark that up again. And I drink a lot of herbal teas, and so it's nice to know what does what and what to drink when I'm looking for what, etc. And the final book that I read was one that I also picked up. I picked this one up in the Barbican's gift shop. Great gift shop there. This is How to Be an Artist by Jerry Saltz. And it's a really sweet book on, oops, almost got myself. It's just some examples and some exercises and some words of encouragement of how to be an artist for either amateur artists or beginner artists or artists who lack confidence. It was quite sweet. I got it mainly because one of my favorite artists has on the back a good review, and I thought, well, if one of my favorite artists has reviewed this highly, it must be amazing. I think it's really good for amateur artists and beginner artists. I think but it's also not saying anything new if you've been in the industry for a while. So take that with a grain of salt. It is now time for, drumroll please, films. I watched so many films this month. Sometimes they just sneak up on you. I also went to a few premieres / screenings, so it wasn't all entirely just me sitting down and seeking out these films. Some were events. 2 films were in March, the last day of March, but I filmed my wrap up for March 2 days before March ended because I had a sponsorship due. Transparency. The Blue Lagoon, 1980, directed by Randall Kleiser. This film, okay, if you don't know what it is, it's a very exploitative film with, what's her name? Brooke Shields. Brooke Shields, the most beautiful girl in the world at that time. I think it was the 80s maybe? I don't know. Someone's screaming on my street. I think she was like 14 when she filmed this, and most of it she's naked with a little leaf covering her privates or her hair or whatever. And her cousin, they're in this shipwreck and they get washed to this island, and they grow up alone on this island. And yes, they're cousins, and yes, they're children. Yes, they have a baby. Yes, they fall in love. Such is the plot. But I watched this for the first time. My mum watched it with me. It was one of her favourite films when she was a kid, so she made me watch it when I was a kid, when I was like 7. And thus, it became very important to me, because I didn't know anything was wrong with it. My 7-year-old critical thinking skills didn't think, oh, Brooke Shields 14, naked everywhere? Nothing wrong with this. My current brain did, though. It's a film that I like because I'm sentimentally attached, and it is visually beautiful. There's there's that. To consider the ethics of it, but that's my review for that. So I rewatched that as a comfort film. Yes, it's a comfort film. It's a sentimental attachment from when I was a kid. You know what's so annoying? Having to justify everything on the internet and constantly walking on eggshells in case something's ethically grey. Anyway, the next film that I watched was Contempt, 1963, directed by Jean-Luc Godard. And this I watched and I enjoyed. This is a film about awful people doing awful things, but they're beautiful. And I think objectively my favourite genre of film is beautiful people doing awful things. This is essentially to get specific about a woman who falls out of love with her husband. But they're both quite awful. They're both beautiful. And it's set in this beautiful French or Italian Riviera, I can't remember. It's along the seaside somewhere, not the Riviera, sorry. And it's just everything's sparkling and dazzling, and Brigitte Bardot's just walking around with her feet touching the sand, and it's all beautiful, and everything's just so, it just takes you to summer, so I liked it. Next film that I watched was Nowhere Boy, 2009, directed by, what's her name? Aaron Taylor-Johnson's wife. Sam Taylor-Johnson. This is a biopic about John Lennon's youth when he was a child. I watched this more than anything because Aaron Taylor-Johnson's in it. There, I said it. It was good. It was alright. It was okay. It was okay. I mean, I've heard plenty about John Lennon's childhood. There's books about it. One of my friends is quite knowledgeable on it and has told me. I didn't realise how Freudian his child was. He really... Everything is because of his mum. Everything. The next film that I watched is Pier le Fou. Pier le Fou. Forgive me. This is from 1965, directed by Jean-Luc Godard. Yes, I was on a Godard kick. This is fun. This film's fun. It's kind of like, it's another beautiful people doing awful things film, and it's kind of like the Bonnie and Clyde of France-esque in a way, kind of. It's just these two beautiful people, Anna Karina. I always confuse Anna Karenina and Anna Karina because it's the same thing in my mind. Anna Karina, beautiful woman, so beautiful. How does she look like that? She's stunning. It's just them running around and hurting people and stealing things, being crazy. Love that genre. The next film that I watched was Mr. and Mrs. Smith from 2005, directed by Doug Liman, maybe? And this is this is kind of another beautiful people doing awful things film. It's got Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie objectively in their prime. They're like an assassin couple, but they don't know that each other are assassins, and they're keeping this double life from each other, but they're both assassins that excel in their field. They find out that each other's an assassin, and they get really angry and divorce and fight, and then they fall in love with each other again. It's this whole thing. But because they're so beautiful, it's so good to watch. If you like awful people, if you like beautiful people doing awful things, boy do I have some recommendations for you. Next film that I watched was Dr. No from 1962, directed by Terrence Young. Baby's first Bond film. Started my James Bond journey this month. I think I watched 3 James Bond films. I may as well just do them all together. I watched Dr. No, 1962, From Russia with Love, 1963, Goldfinger, 1964, Thunderball, 1965. They were churning these out. They got Sean Connery as James Bond and they said, more, the people want more. I suppose the people did. So I watched 4 James Bond films, not in a row, more or less in a row. The reason why I watched them all as well is because every time I date a man, he makes a reference about Bond girls and how I can ruin their life and that kind of thing, which is just such a man thing to say, but also I think it's just because I'm mean and outwit them. Anyway, I love the 60s set design. The plots themselves, they're quite camp. There's this one scene in, I think it was Thunderball. It was Thunderball. There's this one scene in Thunderball where he's on this massage chair getting some massage and he's strapped up like this. And the enemy, the evil guy, the villain, the enemy, he turns up the notch so that he can say that James Bond is stuck in this machine and can't get out as some kind of attack. And there's just this whole scene of James Bond just going like this and screaming, help, just on this massage chair, butt naked. It was so camp. I was giggling so much as I was watching it, but that's my experience with my 4 Bond films. I'm not head over heels obsessed, but I enjoy the 60s set design and the campiness. The films that I watched after / in between all the Bonds, I watched Abigail 2024, directed by Matt Bettinelli Alpin and Tyler Gillett. This I watched for a press premiere screening. It's a movie, it's a very self-aware slasher. It's about vampires and ballerinas and assassins. It's a slasher. It's your classic slasher. It's a comedy slasher. It's in the same vein as Scary Movie, how it's just interesting people running around getting killed, making bad decisions. There's some drugs, there's some sex, there's some ballerina vampires, you know how it goes. It's not the kind of film that I would go out of my way to watch on my own. If I were at home browsing, if I was at home perusing the internet, the worldwide interwebs, I would not put this film on. But I'm intrigued by it. The next film that I watched was There's Still Tomorrow 2023, directed by Paola Cortellesi. And I went to a press screening of this, had no idea what to expect, but oh my goodness, this is one of the most beautiful films I've ever watched in the world. Me and my friend were both crying at the end of it. It's an Italian film, and I believe the introduction, because we had an interview with the director, and I'm pretty sure the introduction they said that it's now the biggest Italian film directed by a woman. Massive achievement. It's about a post-World War II lower class Italian women, their lives. They had really kind of next to no rights, and it was very much the world of their husbands and what their husbands wanted them to do, and it's a story of this one wife and her experience with this, trying to break the pattern or just become something. And it's really beautiful, and I cried at the end, and it's choreographed like a dance. The entire thing is choreographed like a dance, and it can be very triggering. A lot of domestic violence, so be wary of that, but I think it's so beautiful and an absolutely essential watch. Next film that I watched, this was also at an event. I went to a movie pub quiz event, and they put on Shiva Baby. I watched this before, but I hadn't logged it in my Letterboxd, and I love the dialogue in this. The dialogue in this is so good. It's so realistic and so silly and funny. It's a film about a Shiva, and there's these 2 girls who like each other, but they hate each other. And one of the girls is a sugar baby, and her sugar daddy is there and somehow connected with her family, and it's a whole thing. Oh my god, we're still going. We have 3 more films to get through. I've consumed so much media this month because I was waiting for my agent to get me back my edits, so I wasn't working on my novel, which was, I had so much spare time, it was crazy. The next film that I watched was Chinatown, 1974, directed by nobody. Nobody directed this film. So this is a film about this private detective guy who tries to work out some murder mystery. That's really the crux of it. It was good. I liked it. It is a classic. I understand why people say it's a classic for a reason. It was very good. I really enjoyed it, and I would like to watch it again, knowing what I know post the end. It's the kind of movie that you want to watch a few times to really appreciate it. I think it's a very, very well done film. But my qualm with this is not the film. It's a really good film, and I really did enjoy it. It's one of the few films that I have put my phone down for the whole time whilst watching, which is so bad, isn't it? My qualm with this film is not the film. My qualm with the film is the people who watch this film. When I was 19, I was with this guy who was, I don't even know, he was older than me. And we were talking one night, and you could just tell he thought he was so much more cultured and experienced, and he was. He was, because I was 19, and I was just getting drunk all the time and just running about in Melbourne doing whatever the hell people do. I asked him his favourite film, and he said Chinatown, and I said, oh cool. And he was like, you wouldn't have heard of it. There's no way you've watched it. Watch it when you're older. And I thought to myself, what a wanker. What a wanker. Why would he say that? Anyway, I watched it when I was older and I really liked it, and he was right. In this film, we have the incredible Jack Nicholson and Faye Dunaway, 2 beautiful people. Again, beautiful people doing awful things. Can you tell there's a pattern amongst the films that I actively seek to watch for myself, by myself? The next film that I watched was Challenges 2024, directed by Luca Guadagnino. Incredible director, yet to see something from him that I don't like. This was so much fun. I know it's hot in the press right now, and I'm sure you've seen it or are meaning to see it, so I won't do any spoilers, but it was a film that got people talking. My friends and I were sat afterwards, it ended, and we just turned to each other like, stared at each other for a little while. It's about tennis, it's about the game of tennis, the romance of tennis, and this kind of throuple situation is very intensely charged because they all have these intense ambitions and goals and love for each other in the sport, and I was captivated from start to end. And what's my review? My review is I don't know if you can see that. The final film that I watched in April, and this is complete truth because it's May the 2nd as I'm filming this. The final film that I watched is Love Lies Bleeding, 2024. Directed by Rose Glass, and literally just last night, I went to the screening of this. It was a special press screening, and we got to hear the director talk about it and the producer and everything, which is always such a lovely experience to hear people talk about the art that they created. This is, okay, how do I sum this one up? It's a sapphic thriller. It's about this really beautiful beefy bodybuilder girl and Kristen Stewart, who's this messy, scrappy, outback, what do they call them? Redneck? I don't know. Girl. They're both lesbians. Well, one's bi, I don't know. And they fall in love. But it's not so simple. It's never so simple because Kristen Stewart's evil dad has his greedy little hands on everything, and it's such a crazy film. There's a lot of violence, a lot of death, a lot of sex. Lesbian sex, death, violence, bugs. Gym, steroids. Cinema's back, baby. I don't know if you can tell, but I've been speaking really fast on purpose because A, this camera's gonna go flat, B, I had to get through 25 pieces of media, and C, I have to get ready to go to an event. Approximately half an hour ago I should have started getting ready, but I'd like to talk to you instead. That's all of those. If you've read any, watched any, do let me know what you thought. If you've got any recommendations as well, drop them. You know I can always take a recommendation or two. Thank you for being here with me. I feel so bad because I keep on hitting this plant, and my mum told me that plants can hear you and feel you, so I don't want it to feel like I'm hurting it. I've lost the plot. I'm gonna go get ready. I love you so much, and enjoy your evening. Hopefully I can fix my normal camera. I don't know. How do you fix a camera that you dropped? Okay, I love you.